focus on the UN, a project of the local United Nations Association group here in Santa Cruz. The purpose of this show, and this is the fourth in a series, is to give the UN some good publicity. It's so often only the brunt of very bad publicity, and we have a really deep belief that the UN still is a potent force for peace in the world. This show particularly honors International Women's Day, and it was created in 1975 by the UN Assembly to honor women. It's celebrated every year on March 8th, and this year in Santa Cruz we're going to be having a celebration on March 24th, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Keep going? Yeah? Okay. This year we're going to be celebrating locally International Women's Day on March 24th at Loudon Nelson from noon until 3 p.m. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the show. So the UN has hundreds of programs that help women and children, help them with their health, help them with safety, help them with their economic status and with political status. And I hope in the future that we can do some shows that focus on particular things, like Senegal and helping women in Senegal who have one doctor for 30,000 women and how the UN helps them to have better maternal health care. Or Nepal and the refugee situation in Nepal. 80% of the world's refugees are women and children, and that's 35 million total. So there are many innumerable focal points of how women are being helped and served by the UN. But today we're going to be addressing a broader platform, something that was created in 1975. Its formal title is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or Cedaw. And we have with us today a local activist, Sheila Delany, who's been politically active for Sheila Delany, who's been active in this county for a very long time, and it helps us focus on the way the UN acts in our community, the way it affects our community, which is another point of our show that we're really interested in, how the UN comes to Santa Cruz. So welcome, Sheila. So nice to have you here. And I'd like to have you tell us a little bit more about Cedaw. I know that it has a preamble and it has 30 articles, and it delineates discrimination against women, and then that it also tries to set up a platform or a protocol for how to get rid of that discrimination.
The need for a treaty on women's rights was first recognized at the first United Nations Conference on Women in Mexico City. That was in 1975. And the United States had a great deal to do with the drafting of the Cedaw Treaty. It was opened for signature in 1979, and the US signed it in 1980, President Carter. And then the process requires that it go to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for ratification, or for recommendation. So for scrutiny, for hearings, and then for recommendation. And as you know, it has been there ever since. It has been recommended out twice to the floor of the Senate, and both times it's been pulled. And we do not know, because nobody needs to tell you, why it's been pulled. So there has been a lot of work to try to get the US to ratify Cedaw. And there was a big push before the Fourth World Conference on Women, which was in 1995 in Beijing, to get the US to be a ratified country. It didn't work.
Tell us more about that original meeting in Beijing that got you inspired prior to it in the women's gathering in Beijing.
What got me into it?
Yeah.
I was part of the group that went to Oakland for the regional conference. The process for determining a UN treaty, and in this case Cedaw, was to hold regional conferences in the different areas of the United States. And we are the 9th region. And it was held in Oakland, so it was close by, and I was at the time also on the Women's Commission, and I'm part of an organization called the Valley Women's Club. And we decided that we wanted to take young women to that conference to speak on what the issues of interest for them were, because that was part of what we were doing, was we were saying, these are the things we want to have in this platform for action. These are the things we want to see pressed that will be the points that will enable women to not only move forward in their own countries but around the world. So the platform for action was developed as a way of implementing Cedaw. Cedaw was signed, Cedaw was ratified by a large number of countries within the first year. And it takes 21 countries, I think it is, to ratify to the point where it goes into effect as an international treaty. It was the fastest UN treaty that was done. But the US has not yet ratified. So the platform for action, it was noticed in a lot of countries that although many countries signed on and ratified, they really hadn't done much. They said, oh, we ratified this, we believe in women's rights. But they hadn't actually moved the process forward. And part of the process is when your country ratifies Cedaw, you must make a report to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women within the first year. And there are meetings 3 times a year at the UN and in that commission to check up on where the countries are. So you do it once within the first year, and then every 4 years you do an update. And the commission can say there are certain areas that we want all countries now to look at. Violence against women was one, to see, to kind of pressure countries, like you can't skate around this. Violence against women is an area that needs to be looked at and addressed and rectified, and countries weren't necessarily addressing it. So the platform for action was a way to say to countries, here, you don't think that you know how to do this? We'll show you how to do it. So that was why we went to Oakland, was to say what we wanted to see in the platform for action from the US point of view. And
maybe we should back up just a little bit and say a little more about Cedaw, because some people know everything about it, some people know nothing about it.
Right.
Just a little more detail. I remember you had this
booklet that has been actually put out by the Baha'i This is the Bible, and it's Cedaw, this is the rights of women, rights that benefit the entire community, and it describes Cedaw, which is, it is the treaty that defines discrimination against women as any distinction, restriction, or exclusion made on the basis of sex. It's very simple. But it also contains a number of provisions that encourage governments, require those ratifying to stop discriminating, to incorporate into their laws, their policies, and their practices active ways of decreasing discrimination and bringing women into the mainstream in all the areas of cultural, social, and political life in the country.
And how did you move from your interest in Cedaw to being part of the Santa Cruz, co-chair of the Santa Cruz Women's Commission, Santa Cruz County Women's Commission, and the interface that is being now created with Cedaw in that commission?
When I went to the Oakland conference, you had to choose which workshops you wanted to go to, and most of the girls wanted to go to the media workshop, and I went to the Cedaw workshop. I didn't know anything about it, and I thought this would be interesting because it was an international treaty. And that was where I first heard about Cedaw and what it was and what it did and why we needed to ratify it. And we took the train up to Oakland, and on the way home I said, 1, I'm going to get a Cedaw resolution passed in Santa Cruz County, and 2, I'm going to Beijing. So we did that. I worked on a Cedaw resolution for Santa Cruz County. It was passed in 1995, and I went to Beijing.
Tell us just a little about Beijing, because it was such, for every woman I know who was there, it was such a big moment in their lives. And so tell us just a little bit about that.
It was extremely exciting. I'd never been to China. I've been to Europe. I had never been to China before. And I thought that I just wanted to go and be part of this. And there was a lot of work that was done online ahead of time, people discussing things online, so I learned how to do a certain amount of communication on the computer and learn about what was going on. The number of women that went were 36,000, and I'm sure that anybody that followed what was going on knows that China originally tried to actually cop out on having the non-governmental organizations part of the conference. All UN conferences have an official part and a non-governmental part. And they are integral. They're both part of what goes on. China said, we want the official one, but we don't want that other one. And they were required to do it, but what they did was move us 35 kilometers out of town. So there was a spirit of, you know, we're not going to let them get away with this, and a spirit of great solidarity. And just to walk onto that area and look around and see women from all over the world and see these structures that were controlled by women, and women discussing issues and women talking about issues and carrying banners and waving placards and having demonstrations and doing theater. I mean, it was really a highlight of my life. And part of our job, my husband and I both went, part of our job was to record it, take pictures of it, and then come back and report. So we did a slideshow of Beijing and what went on. And I think I must have showed that 45 times. I can still show it, and it's still wonderful, because it's so inspiring to see just what women stood up for and how that broke down my own mental images of how women behave. So it was very exciting.
So when you came back, how did that continue to unfold for you?
One of the things that happened was the United Nations Association became part of, or helped start, a group called Beyond Beijing. So a lot of us who'd been to Beijing and people who wanted to implement the platform for action, and that's what this was all about. We've got this tool, there's this treaty, we haven't signed the treaty, or we haven't ratified the treaty, but we've got these tools. What are we going to do to make things work for women, even if we haven't got the treaty? So one of the things we did was have a march on International Women's Day and a panel on women's economic justice. We did a lot of actions around that. The Women's Commission later took up getting, pressing for Cedaw ratification and trying to get a Cedaw ordinance passed in Santa Cruz County.
So tell me a little bit more about the women's organization, the Santa Cruz County Women's Commission, right, that Sam Farr originally asked you to be on, because I think a lot of us don't really know that much about it. So.
It was actually Fred Keeley.
Oh, Fred Keeley.
Sam Farr was an
Later,
assembly member at the time. Fred Keeley was appointed to, or was elected to the board. The Women's Commission is a body that represents the women of the county. We have 2 members from each of the 5 districts, so each supervisor appoints 2 women to the group. And our job is to advise the Board of Supervisors on policies and practices that affect women and girls in Santa Cruz County. It's a very large mandate. We do a lot of things.
And so this work with Cedaw and the way it's manifesting in particular ways at this point with the
SOAG?
The SOAG, yes, the SOAG.
Initially, we worked on getting a Cedaw ordinance in Santa Cruz County, which is a broad spectrum item, kind of like the Cedaw Treaty. And then we realized that in order to support that, we were going to need to do what a country is required to do when they first ratify, which is come up with a report on the status of women and girls in that country. So on our own, we started doing a status of women and girls report. It's called SOWAG, S-O-W-H-E. So we've been working on that for the last 2 years. And that's to gather data in the areas of educational, criminal justice, political participation, economic justice, violence against women, and healthcare. So we've got most of our data. We've been doing focus groups and interviews, and now we're trying to compile it all together and kind of boil it down into a report that makes sense and that shows what the needs of women are in Santa Cruz County, what the needs of girls are, where the policies as stated don't meet the realities. And one of the examples is that we found that in the area of economic justice, which is the most crucial area for women worldwide, because if your economy isn't working for you, you can't do much of anything. That in Santa Cruz County in the year 2000, the self-sufficiency income for a single adult was $20,000. But in Santa Cruz County in the year 2000, the median income for men was $30,000. The median income for women was $19,000. So the conclusion is that women with or without children had a much more difficult time than men making ends meet, because women didn't come up to that standard and men were $10,000 over it.
So this work around SOWAG and getting the report together is to help accomplish what?
It's in support of getting a Cedaw ordinance passed in Santa Cruz County and getting the enforcement for that, to demonstrate that there is need, that despite being a very progressive, liberal, aware county, there are still areas where women and girls are not enjoying equal pleasures, equal rights, equal economic justice with men.
And so it was interesting to me when we spoke about this earlier that to get an ordinance is different than passing the county passing a resolution.
Right, a resolution is a statement of intent, and they passed a resolution saying we think that Santa Cruz County should encourage the United States to ratify Cedaw. It's pretty easy.
Well, lately we've been hearing in the newspaper, in the Sentinel, about the county resolutions that are being passed. This is a whole other step, and it was very interesting to me, the process. Can you tell us a little bit about that process with the ordinance being passed?
Oh, an ordinance is a law. An ordinance is what you have to follow. So like Cedaw, with Cedaw as a treaty, if you ratify Cedaw, you must work to eliminate discrimination against women and girls. If we pass a Cedaw ordinance in Santa Cruz County, what we want is to take all the laws we already have that protect and help women and girls, put them under one umbrella, and enforce them and move this forward so that we can have real equal justice.
And do you think that that would help create more pressure on the state level and then hopefully the national level? Is there a thought that, you know, each community, I think that you said that there are several other communities around the country that have them.
Yes, San Francisco passed a Cedaw ordinance in 1998, and what they've been doing is then working on enforcing it, measuring how it's working, looking at the effects of it, and extending it. Los Angeles County passed a Cedaw ordinance in 2003. So we didn't quite get to be the second ones in the state, but we're still hoping. The state had a Cedaw ordinance passed and went to the governor's desk, and he vetoed it.
And that was when?
That was 2 years ago. So with the change in the political picture in the country and locally, I'm hoping that we will be able to pressure the state and to get the governor to sign it this time. And I think that if they don't do it from the top down, then you've got to do it from the bottom up. So that's what we're doing. We're doing it from the bottom up. Sisters doing it for themselves.
Well, that's kind of where I just was thinking about, you know, it's so much minutia in a way, and so many meetings, many meetings. And yet you must have a deep belief that each step will help build something, and that it's really important that this be passed in a worldwide level.
I do. It seems ridiculous to me that we waste half the talent in the world, and that we make policies that ignore the separate needs of people. Boys and girls are in jail for different reasons. They have different causes. If you're making all your policies looking at boys, you're wasting half your money. And that's lousy economics. I mean, if you put it just at an economic level, it makes much more sense to educate women and girls, to promote them, to not waste the brain power, to do things that make the world a more equitable place, which in my opinion makes it a better place. And I don't think I'm alone.
No, I don't think so. And we spoke briefly before about why is it that something that seems like such a duh this is how many years later? 1979.
20 plus years.
We are coming up to 30 years.
Right.
And countries that Iraq, Afghanistan have ratified it. That's not saying the actions are there, and that's a whole other important issue. But that the U.S. hasn't ratified it is somewhat astounding.
Because we are very isolationist in this country. We have a tendency to be that way. And I think we feel that we've done everything right. We're telling other countries what to do, but we are the only industrialized nation in the world that has not ratified this. 185 countries have ratified this. We're the only one in the Western Hemisphere. I mean, this is a statistic I know by heart. And it's embarrassing. We talked about it being embarrassing to go to Europe and talk to your friends. It's something that I just think needs to be done, and it's way overdue. I think the reason that many things don't get done is because our laws and our practices are based on cultural assumptions, and cultural assumptions are not necessarily equitable. So it's just a way of looking at things. Also, we like to say that there's a level playing field, women have equal opportunity. That is true at some point, but it's true going in, but it's not necessarily true coming out.
What do you mean by that?
That you can say we have equal access to hiring, and that may be true. But when you look at who's employed, what sectors they're employed in, what kind of money they make, and how they're promoted, that's where you need to look to see if, in fact, your systems are equitable. Because if you have 50% women in the population who are trained, educated, and capable, then 50% of your people at the top should be women. That's just common sense. That's just numbers. That's simple math. And that's not the case. So that's what I'm talking about.
Well, one of our purposes in this show is that the community has more exposure to the positive things the UN's doing, but also what they can do, how they can take part in the community action, how they can interface with the UN. And so I wondered if there's anything that you'd like to say about how people can help, how they can get involved if this is an issue that really speaks to their hearts.
I think that one thing that they can do is pressure their electeds, and I mean all their electeds. Certainly the California electeds at the federal level are supportive, but more pressure needs to be put on. This has been put on a back burner. Lynn Woolsey, who's in the Assembly, no, Lynn Woolsey is in the Congress, sorry. She has proposed a resolution in support of Cedaw at the federal level in the House of Representatives. She has a lot of co-signers, and that needs to be pressured. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee needs to get calls from us, not just to our members that may be on it, but to all the people on it, saying, this is embarrassing, this is ridiculous. We say that we are in the world doing all these things for women's rights, but we don't have equal rights guaranteed for women in our own country. That's lost us a lot of credibility internationally.
Are there other things that people can do?
If people want to help at a really local level, they can join the UNA, certainly. They can also contact the Women's Commission. Women's Commission number is 454-2772. They can come help us work on the SOAG report, getting the work out, getting the word out, and getting it out to the community. Because we are doing this with no money and all volunteers. Lots of students, lots of dedicated people, a lot of hours, and it would be really nice if we had some more expert help.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just talk to your friends about it. Get this book. You can. The number will be up on the screen. Learn about Cedaw. Talk to your friends about it. Let people know that you think this is interesting, this is good, and this is something that we should be part of. This is something that the United States should be leading in, not stumbling behind.
Thank you, Sheila, very much.
Thank you, John.
So many of these websites and numbers about the issues will be on the screen at the end. I'd like to take just a minute to encourage people to join the United Nations Association. And the number for that is 426-3101. And to encourage people to shop at the UNICEF store, which helps support a lot of the things that the United Nations Association goes on to support, sends the money on. And I want to say something about International Women's Day, which is going to be on March 24th from 12 noon to 3 p.m. The event itself is free, and there'll be speakers there. And then there also is an international soup kitchen where some of the really great chefs around town donate soups, and there's a charge for that, and you can eat all that you want once you pay. And then there's also going to be a silent auction and some other there'll be goodies for the silent auction and treasure sale. So it'd be wonderful if you would come out. That's Saturday, March 24th, and from noon until 3 p.m. and the speakers will be at 1 p.m. So I'd like to thank the community TV station here and the wonderful people that help. Ken Nobler is the United Nations Association member whose passion has begun the productions of this series of shows, and we hope to continue it with a lot of other topics in the future. And thanks to all of the volunteers who come down to this station and give their time, and on this day it's a Sunday, very kind of them to help us out. Thanks, and tune in again to Focus on the UN.